Hey folks, welcome back to Legacy of Old Age. What if there was a simple sign that could tell us we might live to 100, and it's something we can all work on, right now in our golden years? For us old-timers over 70, living long and strong is a dream we hold close, and today I've got a story that might just show us the way. Seniors over 70 with this sign, living to 100, isn't surprising. We're diving into a topic that's as warm as a summer breeze, with stories that'll tug at your heart, open your eyes, and maybe even give you a few tricks from the old days to keep you going for years to come. Stick with me, because I've got tales that'll make you smile, think, and hold your loved ones a little closer. In the miles ahead, you'll hear about a sweet widow whose smile lights up a room, a proud farmer who learned the hard way about loneliness, a spunky gal who's the heart of her family, and a straight talk from my own pop that showed me what the experts have known for years. So grab a cup of coffee or whatever you sipped back when life was a little slower and settle in, folks. This road's got some turns worth taking. It all started a few summers back, when I stopped by Mrs. Mabel's place down in Tennessee. She lived in a little clapboard house off a dirt road, the kind with a sagging porch and a garden out back that'd make your mouth water, tomatoes red as a barn, beans climbing high on their poles. Mabel was 82, with a laugh that'd warm you up faster than a July sun, and a knack for baking pies that'd win any county fair. I'd known her for years. She'd been a school teacher, raised 3 kids on her own after her husband passed, and always had a kind word for everyone. That day, when I knocked on her screen door with a jar of my mama's peach preserves, I found her sitting on her porch, surrounded by her grandkids, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Mabel," I said, setting the jar down on her checkered tablecloth, "you're looking fit as a fiddle. What's your secret?" The air smelled of cinnamon and fresh-cut grass, and her old tabby cat, Whiskers, was curled up at her feet, purring softly. She chuckled, a sound like wind chimes on a breezy day, and said, "It's no secret, son, it's my family, my friends, the folks at the church social. They keep me going." I sat down, watching her grandkids chase each other around the yard, and she told me her story. Mabel had always been the heart of her community. Every Sunday, she'd host a big lunch after church, her table piled high with fried chicken and cornbread, her house filled with laughter. Her kids and grandkids visited often, and she never missed a chance to chat with her neighbors over the fence. "I'm never alone," she said, her smile wide, "and I feel stronger every day for it." I sat there, folks, feeling a warmth spread through me. Mabel was living proof of something the experts have been saying for years. She's 82, but you'd never guess it. Her step is steady, her mind sharp, and her heart full. I started thinking about what makes someone like her so strong, and I dug into what the folks at Harvard have been studying for over 80 years. Since 1938, the Harvard study of adult development has followed hundreds of folks, over 2,000, when you count their kids and grandkids, to figure out what keeps us living long and happy. And you know what they found? It's not money, or a fancy job, or even a perfect diet, though those things help. The biggest sign that someone might live to 100 is having strong connections with family, friends, neighbors, the folks you wave to at the market. Mabel's got that sign in spades, and it's no surprise she's still going strong, with a spark that makes you think she just might blow out 100 candles someday. Ever known someone over 70 who's got a fire in their step and a house full of laughter, folks? Or maybe you've got a story about what keeps you going. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your tales. That day with Mabel got me thinking about this sign's strong connections and what it really means for us old-timers. The Harvard folks say it's not just about living longer. It's about living better. Folks with tight-knit relationships have lower rates of diabetes, arthritis, even memory troubles, because those connections help us handle life's stresses, keeping our hearts and minds in good shape. But I knew Mabel's story was just the beginning, and I had to dig deeper to see what happens when that sign isn't there. Mabel's story warmed my heart like a sunny day in July. Folks, that image of her surrounded by grandkids, her house filled with laughter, showed me what the experts at Harvard have been saying for years. Strong connections can keep us going well into our golden years. But it got me wondering what happens when that sign isn't there, when loneliness creeps in and takes hold of us old-timers over 70. I'd seen Mabel thrive with her family around her, but I knew not everyone's so lucky, and I needed to understand the other side of this coin, what it means to live without those TIs. That's when I heard about Mr. Hank down in Georgia, a proud man who learned the hard way about the cost of being alone, teaching me a lesson I'll never forget. Hank lived on a small farm just outside Macon, the kind of place where the air smells of hay and honeysuckle, and the fields stretch out like a patchwork quilt under the summer sun. He was 76, built like a barn door, even after all those years, with a laugh that'd shake the leaves off a tree when you could get him to laugh, that is. Hank had been a farmer his whole life, raised hogs, grew peanuts, and could fix a tractor blindfolded with nothing but a wrench and a prayer. He was a regular at the local diner once, always at the counter with a cup of black coffee, swapping stories with the other old-timers about the good old days. But that spring, when I stopped by his place to drop off a sack of pecans I'd picked up for him, he loved them in his pies. I found him sitting alone in his kitchen, staring at the wall with a look of weariness I'd never seen before. "Hank," I said, setting the pecans down on the counter, "you look like you've lost your best hog. What's wrong?" The air smelled of stale coffee and linseed oil, and his old hound, Rusty, was snoring in the corner like a freight train. He didn't look at me, just shook his head and said, "I'm tired. Son, more tired than I've ever been." I pulled up a chair, the wood creaking under me, and waited. Hank wasn't one to open up easy, but I could tell something heavy was weighing on him. Finally, he sighed, heavy as a sack of feed, and said, "I've been alone too long. After my wife passed, I stopped going to the diner, stopped seeing the boys at the feed store. I thought I'd be fine on my own, but I ain't. My blood pressure's up, my knees hurt worse than ever, and I can't sleep a wink." I sat there, folks, feeling a lump in my throat the size of a peach pit. Hank wasn't just tired. He was lonely, and it was taking a toll on him in ways I hadn't expected. He told me how it started after his wife, Ellie, passed 5 years ago. He'd pulled away from everyone, thinking he didn't need the chatter of the diner or the company of his old buddies. But over time, his health started slipping. His doctor told him his blood pressure was through the roof. His arthritis was flaring up worse than ever, and he was having trouble remembering things. "I didn't think being alone would do this to me," he said, his voice low. "But I feel like I'm fading, and I don't know how much longer I can keep going." I reached out, put a hand on his shoulder, and promised we'd figure it out. I wasn't about to let Hank fade away on his own. Ever known someone over 70 who's felt the weight of loneliness, folks? Or maybe you've felt it yourself, that ache of being too far from the ones you love. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. That day with Hank broke my heart, but it lit a fire in me to learn more about what loneliness does to us old-timers, and how it ties to that sign Mabel had, the strong connections that can help us live to 100. I started digging, and the experts have some hard truths to share. The folks at Harvard, And their study of adult development, that's been running since 1938, found that loneliness isn't just a feeling, it's a killer. They say folks who feel isolated are more likely to have high blood pressure, heart trouble, even memory problems, and they don't live as long as those with tight-knit TIs. A study from Massachusetts General Hospital and UCSF in 2023 backed that up. They looked at over 8,000 folks over 65 and found that those who felt lonely or cut off from family had a 22% higher chance of passing away within 4 years, compared to those who had strong connections. But there's hope, folks, and Hank's story didn't end there. I got him to come with me to the diner the next week, just for a cup of coffee, I said, and you should have seen his face light up when the old boys at the counter started teasing him like no time had passed. He started going back regular, even joined a card game at the church social, and last I heard, his blood pressure's down, his knees ain't hurting as much, and he's sleeping through the night. There's a trick from the old days with a modern spin to help us through. Back when I was a kid, we'd say a good barn raising takes the whole town, and now the experts said don't go it alone, reach out to your neighbors. Call up an old friend, or just sit a spell at the diner with folks you know. It ain't just about passing the time. It's about keeping your heart and body strong for the years ahead. Hank's lesson from loneliness wasn't the end of what I'd learned, and it got me wondering how others keep those connections tight to live long and well. Hank's story left a bittersweet taste in my mouth, folks like a sip of coffee that had gone cold. His journey from loneliness to finding his way back to the diner showed me how powerful those connections can be for us old-timers over 70. It got me wondering how others keep those connections tight to live long and well, especially the kind that come from the folks closest to our hearts, our families. I'd seen Mabel thrive with her loved ones around her, felt Hank's pain when he lost his way, and I couldn't help but hope there was more to learn about how family TIs can keep us strong. That's when I heard about Miss Betty, a spunky gal from Alabama whose family keeps her going, showing me that the joy of kinfolk might just be the best medicine for a long, happy life. Miss Betty lived in a tidy little bungalow on the edge of Montgomery, the kind of place where the front yard's always blooming with azaleas and the mailbox is painted with sunflowers she did herself. She was 74, with a laugh like a wind chime and a knack for knitting scarves so soft you'd swear they were made of clouds. Betty was a firecracker. She'd been a nurse during the Korean War, raised 4 boys on her own, and could still outdance anyone at the church social, even with her bad hip. I'd known her for years, always seeing her at the county fair with her famous lemon squares, the kind that'd make your mouth pucker and your heart sing. That fall, when I stopped by her booth to pick up a square, I could tell she was in high spirits. Her eyes sparkled like the morning dew, and her grandkids were tugging at her apron, giggling up a storm. "Betty," I said, brushing crumbs off my shirt, "you're looking younger every time I see you. What's keeping you so spry?" She laughed, bright as a bell, and motioned me to sit on a bench nearby, the air thick with the smell of cotton candy and hay. "It's my family, honey," she said, her voice full of warmth. "They're my sunshine, always have been." I leaned in, watching her grandson chase a butterfly while her daughter helped at the booth, and she told me her story. Betty's house was never empty. Her 4 boys, their wives, and a whole gaggle of grandkids were always coming and going, filling her days with laughter and love. Every Sunday, they'd pile in for supper, and she'd cook up a feast: fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread piled high, while the kids played in the yard and her boys swapped stories around the table. "They keep me on my toes," she said, her grin wide. "And I wouldn't have it any other way. I sat there, folks, feeling my heart swell. Betty wasn't just living. She was thriving, and you could see it in every step she took. At 74, she had the energy of someone 20 years younger, her hands steady as she knitted, her mind sharp as a tack, and her spirit brighter than a summer day. I couldn't help but think of what the experts at Harvard have been saying in their study of adult development, running since 1938. They've followed thousands of folks over the years, and they found that family ties, those close bonds with our kids, grandkids, even our cousins, aren't just nice to have. They're a lifeline. Folks with strong family connections have lower rates of heart trouble, diabetes, even memory problems, because those TIs give us a reason to keep going, lifting our spirits and keeping stress at bay. Another study from the folks at Massachusetts General Hospital in 2023 looked at over 8,000 people over 65 and found that those who saw their grandkids often even just once a month were 20% less likely to have memory troubles compared to those who didn't. Betty's got that sign in spades, and it's no wonder she's still dancing at the church social, with a spark that makes you think she might just blow out 100 candles someday. Ever known an old-timer over 70 who's the heart of their family, folks? Or maybe your kinfolk are what keep you going strong. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. That day with Betty taught me a trick from the old days with a modern spin. Back when I was a kid, we'd say a house full of kin is a house full of love, and now the experts say keep those family ties tight. Call your kids, visit your grandkids, or have the whole gang over for supper, even if it's just once a month. It ain't just about the good times. It's about keeping your heart and mind strong so you can live long and well. The folks at Harvard say even a weekly phone call with your daughter or a fishing trip with your grandson can lower your stress, keep your blood pressure down, and give you a reason to get up each morning. Betty's joy from her family wasn't the end of what I'd learned, and it got me wondering what the experts had to say about why these connections matter so much for our years ahead. Betty's story lit up my heart like a firefly on a summer night. Folks seeing her thrive at 74, surrounded by her kids and grandkids, showed me how family TIs can keep us old-timers over 70 going strong, maybe even to 100. But it got me wondering what the experts had to say about why these connections matter so much for our years ahead, and how we can keep them tight as we get on in age. I'd seen Mabel's house full of laughter, felt Hank's pain when he lost his way, learned from Betty's joy with her kinfolk, but I still didn't have the full picture, the kind of straight talk that'd help us understand why this sign of strong relationships is so powerful, and what we can do to hold on to it. That's when I turned to my own Pop, a man who'd been wondering about his own years ahead, and a talk with a health expert that gave me the clarity I'd been chasing. Pop lived in that same little house outside Springfield, Missouri, where the blackberry bushes still grew wild and the porch creaked under every step. He was 83, with a voice that growled like an old diesel engine and a laugh that'd make you forget your troubles. Pop had always been a big man, round as a barrel, with a belly that had earned him the nickname Big Hank, down at the diner, but he'd started slowing down lately, and it had him thinking about his time left. That evening, when I found him on the porch, rocking in his chair with a mug of coffee in hand, the air smelling of wood smoke and the last of the summer flowers, he looked at me with a furrowed brow. "I've been wondering, son," he said, his voice softer than usual, "what's it take to make it to 100? I've got aches and pains, but I'd sure like to see my great-grandkids grow up. You think I've got a shot?" I sat there, folks, feeling a pang in my chest. Pop had always been a rock, and hearing him wonder about his years ahead tugged at my heart. I'd promised Mabel, Hank, and Betty I'd find answers, And now I had to keep that promise for Pop too. I called up a health expert I knew, a doctor named Clara who'd been studying aging at a big university in Boston, and set up a meeting at the community center. Clara was a warm woman, 60, with a smile that put you at ease and a notebook full of studies she'd been poring over for years. When we sat down in a quiet room, the smell of fresh coffee in the air, I got right to the point. Clara, I said, Pop wants to know what it takes to live to 100. I've been hearing it's all about strong connections, like with family and friends. Is that true? And what can we do to keep them tight? Clara smiled, nodding like she'd heard this question 1,000 times. You're right on the money, she said, her voice steady as a preacher's. The biggest sign someone over 70 might live to 100 is having strong social connections. It's not just a nice thing. It's medicine for your body and soul. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to a page of numbers, and broke it down. The Harvard study of adult development, been running since 1938, has followed over 2,000 folks, and they found that people with tight-knit relationships live longer and healthier lives. They've got lower rates of heart trouble, diabetes, even memory problems, because those connections help us handle stress, keeping our blood pressure down and our minds sharp. In fact, folks with strong TIs in their 70s are 50% more likely to be alive at 90 compared to those who are lonely. She tapped her pen on the table, adding, another study from 2023 at Massachusetts General Hospital looked at over 8,000 folks over 65. Those who saw friends or family regularly were 20% less likely to have memory troubles, and they had a 15% lower chance of heart issues compared to those who were isolated. I sat there, folks, the hum of the community center's chatter in the background, and let that sink in. Pop shifted in his chair, his big hands wrapped around his mug, and said, So you're saying my fishing trips with the grandkids might keep me around longer? Clara laughed, her eyes twinkling, and said, Exactly. Hank, those trips aren't just fun. They're keeping you healthy. She leaned forward, ticking off on her fingers. Here's what you can do to keep those connections tight. First, make time for your family, call your kids. Visit your grandkids, even if it's just once a month. Second, get out in your community, join a card game at the church, or sit a spell at the diner with old friends. And third, don't be afraid to ask for help if you're feeling lonely. Tell someone you trust, maybe your daughter or a neighbor, and let them be there for you. Pop nodded, a grin spreading across his face, and said, Guess I'll be fishing a lot more, might even take the whole family to the lake this weekend. I couldn't help but smile. Folks, that was Pop, always ready to make the best of things. Ever felt the lift of a good day with family or friends, folks? Or maybe you've got a trick for keeping those TIs tight as you get on in years. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. That day with Clara taught me a trick from the old days with a modern spin. Back when I was a kid, we'd say a good barn raising takes the whole town, and now the experts say make time for your people. A weekly call with your daughter, a fishing trip with the grandkids, or a chat over the fence with your neighbor can keep your heart and mind strong, maybe even carry you to 100. Clara's words weren't the end of what I'd learned, and it got me thinking about how we can all hold onto this sign to live long and well in our golden years. Clara's straight talk in the community center was like a warm quilt on a chilly night. Folks had wrapped me up in the know-how to keep us old-timers over 70 going strong, maybe even to 100, just by holding tight to the folks we love. I'd seen Mabel's house full of laughter, felt Hank's pain when he lost his way, learned from Betty's joy with her kinfolk, and sat with Pop as he wondered about his years ahead, only to find hope in the power of connection. Each story added a piece to the puzzle, and by the time I walked out of that center, the sun dipping low over Springfield, I knew the truth. Seniors over 70 with this sign, living to 100, isn't surprising. That sign, strong social connections, isn't just a nice thing to have. It's the best medicine for a long, happy life, and it's something we can all work on, starting today. Let's roll it back and look at the road we've traveled, folks. There's Mabel, sweet as her Tennessee tomatoes, sitting on her porch with her grandkids all around, her laugh warming up the air, as she told me her family keeps her going at 82. I can still see her garden out back, those tomatoes red as a barn, and the way her eyes sparkled with every hug she gave. Then Hank, out by his Georgia barn, his big hands trembling as he told me how loneliness nearly broke him, until he found his way back to the diner and the friends who lifted him up. I'll never forget the weariness in his eyes, the way he came alive again with a cup of coffee and a good laugh. Miss Betty, spunky as ever, filling her Alabama bungalow with the chatter of her kids and grandkids, her laugh bright as a wind chime as she cooked up a Sunday feast at 74. And Pop, my own big Hank, sitting on his Springfield porch with a coffee in hand, wondering about his years ahead, but finding hope in Clara's words, his grin wide as he planned a fishing trip with the grandkids. I can still hear him say, "Guess I'll be fishing a lot more," a spark of joy in his eyes. They're all different, ain't they? Mabel's a widow with a heart of gold. Hank's a farmer who found his way back. Betty's a firecracker who danced circles around us all. And Pop's a stubborn old cuss who'd rather eat pie than worry about tomorrow. But they've all taught me one thing: the sign that can carry us to 100 is the folks we hold close, the ones who make us laugh, keep us steady, and give us a reason to get up each morning. I got to thinking, if they can hold on to this sign, so can we, and I'll be darned if I don't share what I've learned to help every old-timer out there live long and well in their golden years. So let's round up some tricks from the old days with a modern twist to keep those connections tight, folks. First off, make time for your family. Back when I was a kid, we'd say a house full of kin is a house full of love. And now the experts say call your kids, visit your grandkids, or have the whole gang over for supper, even if it's just once a month. The folks at Harvard, in their study of adult development since 1938, found that folks with strong family ties in their 70s are 50% more likely to be alive at 90, because those connections keep our stress low, our blood pressure down, and our hearts strong. They say even a weekly call with your daughter or a fishing trip with your grandson can cut your risk of memory troubles by 20%, like a study from Massachusetts General Hospital in 2023 showed with over 8,000 folks over 65. Second, get out in your community, just like Hank did. Back in the day, we'd say a good barn raising takes the whole toe. And now, the experts say join a card game at the church, sit a spell at the diner with old friends, or just chat with your neighbor over the fence. The Harvard study says folks with tight-knit community ties have a 15% lower chance of heart trouble, because those connections give us a sense of belonging, keeping our spirits high and our bodies healthy. They say even one good friend you see regular can make a difference, someone to share a laugh with, or just sit quiet on the porch together, watching the sun go down. And here's the best trick of all. Folks, don't be afraid to ask for help if you're feeling lonely. Pop's talk with Clara showed me how important it is to reach out. Back when I was young, we'd say a good farmer knows when to call for help with the harvest. And now, the experts say tell someone you trust, maybe your daughter, a neighbor, or a friend at church if you're feeling cut off. The folks at Harvard found that loneliness can raise your risk of passing early by over 20%, but just one honest talk can start to change that, bringing you back to the folks who care. If you're struggling, there's groups out there like senior centers or church socials where you can meet new friends or even call a hotline if you just need someone to listen. What's your trick for keeping your loved ones close, folks? Ever found a way to beat loneliness and feel stronger for it? Drop it in the comments. Your stories are the gold here, and they might just help someone else. Hit that like button if these tales hit home. Smash subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. There's more wisdom waiting just around the bend. Share this with a friend who'd get a kick out of it. Let's keep the conversation going and keep our hearts full. I've got more stories to share, so stick with me. We're not done yet.